Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are drawing Ken from Street Fighter and I'm going to be talking a little bit about perspective and posing, a little bit of both. It's been a couple of episodes before I've actually gone into a detail on posing, but given how often I do go into detail on posing, I suppose I don't really need to go into it all that much. So I suppose we'll talk a little bit more about the perspective. There's a little bit of effects to talk about as well. Something like that. A little bit of that stuff to talk about. We're gonna have some things to say here, anyways. That's the point I'm getting to. But yeah, there's some adjustments I'm gonna have to make with this one because there's some rough stuff that I'm looking at here. I haven't looked at this one in a few days, so yeah, this one's a little rough. Anyways, I'll roll the intro and then I'll show you what I've got. So yeah. See, it's very dark today, so chances are that the lighting is going to change very quickly today. But anyways, this is what I've got. So yeah, as I mentioned, perspective. Now I also mentioned adjustments. One of the adjustments I'm going to need to make is the belt here is a little too long. The ties on the belt are obviously too long. That'll need to get trimmed in a bit. I made that longer for the sake of getting the bending going on, but realistically it doesn't need to be there all that much. Now, big one is perspective. So, the hand is really coming out towards you like that, so you got the perspective going on there. And yeah, that's kind of what I wanted, is that it's really shooting towards you in such a way where it's like really in your face like that. So yeah, the hand is pretty big. Versus the rest of him. His head is also very big. Yeah, this arm is really big, this arm is kind of small, and then the rest of the body is sort of at a medium sort of thing. This is like a vague, there's like an ever so slight low angle to this, of where like the head is kind of, like the legs are kind of big versus like the top of the body. The body looks a bit short versus the legs. Some of that is just maybe a bit of a proportioning problem. Some of it might get fixed just by virtue of me doing it, by virtue of me completing this. I wanted to add a little bit of fire around the hand. It had two poses which I was going to do for this. There was one which was the peace sign, then there was the other one which was going to be like a POV Shoryuken. Was the other idea I had, where the fist was going to be like it was going to be like here basically, and then the rest of them was going to be like quite small back here. Something kind of really intense perspective. But I settled on something which is a little less intense, because I don't often do stuff with like super intense perspectives, so I wanted to try and, if I'm going to do that at some point, I want to build up to it. I don't want to just jump right into it, because last time I already did some experimenting with the Phantasm, so I suppose that this was another experiment. But yeah, as I say, I'm going to have some adjustments to make here. I suppose the thing which I should mention is that obviously what I've done here in terms of the design is that I've gone for Street Fighter 2 Ken, of where he's got his hair is middle parted, and it's sort of a bit moppy. It's not super long. His face is a bit nightmarish. I will say that, so I'm gonna change that. Yeah, his face is a little freakish. Which I suppose is appropriate for the character, because so often it is that you see various different Kens with just horrifying faces. The eyebrows I think are going to change, because I wanted to try and, because obviously both Ken and Ryu often have the sort of flat line eyebrows that are like really kind of fluffy at the end. And I wanted to try and sort of make that look a little bit more natural, so I added a bit of a curve to them so it looks like an actual human brow shape. But I think I might actually flatten them and just sort of straighten them, so it's a little bit more cartoony looking. Because I think that'll look a little better. We'll see. I mean, it'll be one of the first things I do, so we'll see if it works pretty much immediately. So we'll obviously have to think about that. But otherwise, yeah, he's got a bit of a meaty head. I think that's another problem I'm having here. I think I need to actually shrink his jaw a little bit, because it comes back very far, so I think I actually need to taper in his jaw a little bit like that. Either that or just bring his hair down a bit more so that it covers more of the end of the jaw. I mean, with how much his hair is kind of getting flung over here, you should think that more of it's being flung towards this way, so maybe I'll do that. I added these little bits of flame around the hand. This hand is kind of a bit awkward. This kind of like weird wrist pose there just isn't quite working. It's kind of like awkwardly bent in such a way where it just doesn't look right. So I'm gonna need to change that a little bit. I might just I might just literally rotate the hand over to this way a bit more. I mean, I could literally do that right now. Might do that just right now and see how that looks. Just see if that works for us. That flame doesn't need to move, I think. Right, let's see how well this works. Let's just rotate it around again, every now and then. This is the big benefit of being able to do stuff digitally, is when you make weird little mistakes in proportioning or just sort of how you pose things, you can just rotate it, you can just change it. How much better does that look? Yeah, I think that's a lot better. The flames are a little closer together now. Obviously I need to polish up some of those lines, but I can just do that whenever I'm doing the details. Yeah, okay, so that's that fixed, I think. I think the hand was actually really drawing my eye. Now that I've changed that, it was really drawing my eye before. So I think it's a little bit more natural looking. He does kind of have gorilla arms, which is something I'm noticing. By that I mean that his arms are very long. Like if this arm was straight, his hand would be going down near to his knee. Maybe I should move up his arm a bit. Nah, it's probably fine. It's probably fine. Yeah, as I say, there's a few little issues like that which I'm just sort of noticing as I look through this. Yeah. As I mentioned, Street Fighter 2 Ken because of the hair, but also because of the sleeves, because he's not got ripped sleeves or trouser legs. His sleeves and trouser legs are clean cut off, which is how you know it's Street Fighter 2 Ken. Because in the Alpha games, he's got ripped sleeves, as he does in Street Fighter 3, I believe, and 4. And then in 5, he just has a different design altogether. But yeah, the hair is the more obvious one. Now the eye color actually is something I should maybe think about, because his eye color changes sometimes. Sometimes his eyes are blue, sometimes his eyes are brown. I'll need to bring up reference for that, but that's nothing I have to worry about just yet. Is there anything else I really need to mention here? The perspective isn't too crazy. I mean, again, perspective is pretty simple in the methodology. It's just the actual practice of it, which is a bit challenging. The methodology, when it comes to perspective, is to just make the thing that you want to be closer bigger. The thing that's closer to the camera should always be the biggest. The thing that's furthest from the camera should always be the smallest. Sometimes you want to intensify your perspective. That can make it look a bit more dynamic and interesting. So for example, if this hand was absolutely gigantic, if this hand covered like about this much space and then the rest of him was way smaller, that would actually look a little bit more dynamic. And then obviously this hand was then tiny. That would be very dynamic, but it wouldn't necessarily be the most clear, which is, I mean, that's part of perspective, is a little unclear sometimes with it, but again, the point of it is to just sort of create some more dynamic, interesting visuals. But yeah, as I say, there's things which I'll have to change here in these details, but the sort of basics of the perspective will remain mostly the same. Again, there's sort of the 3 layers of it. This is closest, this is mid, then this is furthest back. So that's sort of how you go with a lot of perspective. You just need to sort of... Environmental perspective is different. Environmental perspective, you get like 1-point perspective, you get stuff like that. You get multi-point perspective, all these things. That's for environments that well, in my experience, I don't typically apply that to characters. I normally would do perspective on a character by eye, which maybe isn't the best way of doing it, but that's how I tend to do it. And whenever I say by eye, I just mean, I just sort of look at it and figure it out that way. I don't tend to use perspective grids or anything like that, or all that stuff. I find that it's just easier, for me at least, to just kind of look at it and figure out where things should be going. But yeah, like realistically speaking, the arm should probably be like again, I should maybe like it should probably be closer to him and probably be a little smaller. I think that's realistically it should probably be like that. Perspective on this sort of level, whenever you get something coming straight at the camera, can be a little challenging. Because again, you want to set it up where it's stuff like this, or where it's like you've got something really close to the camera, then that makes what's furthest from it look really far away, like that. So that's the thing, you just have your sort of hands reaching out like that, and then you then have like again, hand out like that, and then you don't really see most of the arm, but you maybe see a bit of the shoulder, just so you can see this much is coming out like that, and then this is the furthest here is me. So it's just to sort of demonstrate that stuff. But yeah, again, perspective isn't the most complicated thing in the world. You can tell it, you can see it very easily. It's something very easily demonstrable, especially with a camera, because that's sort of what you're going off of when you're drawing it. You're drawing it based on sort of cameras, because in reality, a lot of perspective is tricks. So that's the thing. Whenever it comes to a camera, it's sort of perspective tricks like that. And so whenever you're drawing it, you're sort of doing it as though there were a camera, because that's kind of how you do that stuff. Same way whenever you get like 3-point, 5-point perspective, it starts to look a bit more fish-eyed, things like that. But that's obviously environmental stuff, and that's not what we're talking about today. So yeah, anyways, I will actually start these details after all that rambling. I'll do these details, I'll be back to do the colours, and obviously I'll have to make some more adjustments there probably. But yeah, anyways, I'll move on. Okay, that is our details done. So I trimmed in the ties on the belt. I feel like the proportions of the hands are a little bit more normal looking. The feet are a bit weird looking. But realistically speaking, they're a priority, so I don't think that's a problem. But yeah, one of the things which I want, yeah, I feel like I fixed the face. The face I sort of trimmed it in a little bit. Now the only thing that's a little weird is the area around the mouth. That's maybe a little off looking, but I think it's fine. Maybe, you know what if I just do this? What if I just remove that bit? How does that look now? I mean, it looks better. That much is for sure. It does look better with that bit just removed entirely. I think that's a little better. Just trim in the lip. That seems to work. Because the other time the lip just didn't look quite right. It was just feeling like it was looking a little much. Trim that as well. Just trim in the smile line a tiny bit. Yeah, that seems to work, I think. The hair came out pretty much exactly how I wanted. It looks pretty much the same. I changed the eyebrows. The eyebrows I think look better as straight than they did as curved. I think that sort of helps the face a little bit. And yeah, I think most of the problems with the face came down over here. That it was just sort of, there was too much face here. And also you can sort of see that the jaw is a little slimmer, just from the fact that you can see the edge of it there. But yeah, I think trimming in the face a little bit and just sort of broadening out that sort of cheekbone area. Well, not even broadening it. Like before it was quite narrow, the cheekbone. It was like quite a small area of his face was the cheekbone. And that meant that the sort of like actual cheek itself seemed quite big. Seemed like he had quite big cheeks, so I just sort of narrowed that in. It just makes his face look a bit more, a little bit slimmer. And I think that works a bit there. Yeah, I don't think there's a huge other things I changed all that much. There is something which I should mention actually, and that's the gloves. The gloves. I didn't think about this before, but the gloves that he's wearing are actually the Street Fighter 3 gloves. Because in Street Fighter 3, he's got the padding on the back and around the wrist, and has the strap in the middle of the hand, but also it has just a normal fingerless glove sort of look to it. But in most of the Street Fighter games, that's not how it looks. In most of the Street Fighter, well, I say most of them. In specifically the Street Fighter 2 design, the one which this is designed after, that sort of underglove isn't there. It's just the padded part. So I've sort of ended up adding in the Street Fighter 3 gloves here, which isn't necessarily how it looks, or how it's supposed to look, especially given the hair and the sleeves and trouser legs. One thing which I was thinking of, which I can no longer think of, is the eyes. So I've decided that he's going to have brown eyes, because I looked and in most instances he has brown eyes. The only thing I can actually see where he has blue eyes is Street Fighter 4. So for whatever reason they decided to change his eyes to be blue in that. But in pretty much everything else he's got brown eyes. So I'm going to roll with the brown eyes, because that makes more sense, I suppose, given that that is what his eye color is for most of them. Yeah, I mean, obviously his proportions look a little odd because of the sort of bagginess of the gi, but that's how it looks. It is a very baggy piece of clothing. It obviously it sort of bunches up in around the waist, bunches up around the belt, and then obviously it kind of falls down a little bit at the front and the back. And then it's the same thing with the trouser legs. The trouser legs are very loose and baggy, despite the fact that he does have beefy legs. The trousers are very sort of big and voluminous, so that's sort of how that should look. Now obviously I added a little bit more detailing to the fire because I feel like it looked a little off before, but yeah, typically the sort of trick I find to drawing fire, especially if you're going to have a harsh line on it like this, if you're not going to like paint it in or something like that, because that's also a valid option with fire, is just to paint it in. But in my experience, I prefer giving it a hard edge. It just makes things easier to follow. the way that I normally do it is I tend to try and draw it in one line without taking the pen off the page, or pen off the screen in this case, but pen off the page would also work. But yeah, I usually do it in about in one line, one sort of chunk of fire in one line without removing the pen from, or without lifting the pen. So here I went through and I did all of this like that, and then I dipped that in, then went around, then up like this, then down there, all in the one go. Because it makes it look a little bit messier, especially if you're like kind of adding in these little notches here or there, dragging certain bits up and then bringing them back down and all that stuff. Kind of makes a bit more of a natural sort of messiness to it. And obviously fire is supposed to be somewhat unpredictable, so just going with it and letting the pen do the talking tends to make it look right, in my opinion and in my experience. But yeah, so that's obviously all our detail stuff done. Now with the colors, I'm going to need to color that fire and add some glows and stuff like that, but largely this is not too crazy in terms of our colors. I think our background, I might maybe do some sort of like painted fire sort of things in the background. It'll be mostly like kind of oranges and sort of brown kind of colors maybe, but I'll add sort of like a painted fire sort of swirl that comes up like this, maybe something that kind of adds some sort of like texturing or interesting stuff to the background, but that's not going to be until the painted shading, so that'll probably be that sort of area. But this is obviously where our soft light is going to be, because that's the idea being that the soft light is coming from maybe the fire here, something like that. Makes more sense to me at least. And so yeah, that way we get our sort of over the shoulder kind of rim light that'll be coming in with the light line. Probably do a yellow light line. All that stuff is later's problem though. I'll have to think about it. But yeah, I'll do these colors and then I'll be back to do the painted shading, which will obviously include a lot of our background stuff as well. So yeah. Alright, so that's our colors. Again, as I said, not too difficult, nothing that would take too long. So now it's time for the painted shading. Again, I'll be adding some sort of some kind of swirls and kind of strokes in the background, just to sort of make the background a little bit more interesting looking. Because so far we've just got a pretty flat gradient from the corners. And yeah, just a brown to an orange, that's about it. I'll probably maybe brighten it up a little bit with a color palette. I'll have to look at a color palette before I continue. Yeah, but all I know is that, yeah, our lighting is going to be probably kind of yellowy, because it's mostly going to be coming from the fire. Maybe yellowy orangey, something like that. And yeah, this is where the lighting is coming. This is where the light's coming from, so that means this whole side will be dark. And yeah, I'll add some sort of swirls and sort of strokes to the background, just so that it sort of, I don't know, adds a bit more something to it. Adds a little bit of something to the background. But yeah, I don't actually think I have an enormous amount to cover here. A lot of the stuff that I wanted to cover was the perspective stuff, which was pretty much all done right away. And this was sort of constructed as an easy one, to put it bluntly. This was constructed to be a bit of an easier one, even though the last one was kind of easy. I didn't know that it was going to be that way at the time. I was sort of gambling, because I thought to myself, well, this could be easy, this could be a bit more of a challenge, and that was also an experimental one. So this is the thing. and the ones before that had largely been kind of challenging. So I wanted a few easy ones, just to make my life, again, a little bit easier. So, anyways, I think I'll just do this painted shading. I don't know why I said it like that. I think I'll just do this painted shading, and I'll do my background stuff, and I'll be back to do the detailed shading and the light line and all that stuff. So yeah, I'll just continue. Alright, that is our painted shading and background and everything done. I obviously I was doing a lot of stuff with the background there, so let me break it down. So, because there's a lot of different layers going into this background, there's 5 different layers here of the background. So obviously there's our initial gradient, which is where we started from. Then I layered up some basic sort of watercolor smearing of a sort of an orangey brush, then into well, like a deep kind of reddy orange, then a lighter orange, then a yellowy one, then almost like a whitish one. Then I put like a kind of a pale kind of peachy kind of smoke over that. Then I decided to deepen these gradients because I felt like after the smoke they're getting a bit lost, and so I wanted these to disappear a bit more, the edges of the smears to disappear a bit more. So I got an orange, like a sort of a yellowy orange, and I put a tiny little vignetting, a bit of vignetting here. Then I got almost like a black, a reddy kind of black, and then I did a bit of a similar sort of vignetting edge over here, and so that then kind of blends these smears in. And so then at the end I decided, okay, just underneath the vignetting I wanted to put a little bit more in. So what I did was I did a bit more of a fine smear along here of a sort of a yellow brush, like quite a bright yellow. I did a bit of a smear up there like that, in this sort of shape that I'm tracing with the mouse. And then I went over that with a splatter brush, with a sort of like almost like a flicked paint kind of splatter. So I mean, yeah, that's how you would do it if you're gonna actually recreate this with real paint, is you'd sort of just like flick the paint off of the brush onto the canvas. And naturally you'd obviously do all this background stuff first if you were going to be doing this physically. But yeah, so you just then sort of like flick the paint off, and then you end up with these sort of yellow splatters which sort of stretch out, and obviously this is underneath the vignetting, so it sort of nicely kind of disappears into the edges there. Then I did an orange, same deal, thinner sort of smear up, even thinner than the yellow, and then some orangey kind of splatters, then a kind of a peachy whitey one, and then those I only did a tiny little bit of smearing with the brush, and then put some splatters around there. And then I put a final tiny little bit of a reddy orange around here, because I wanted that to sort of blend into the actual drawn fire here. But it actually ends up looking quite a bit like a like in Street Fighter 6, how you've got the drive impacts and how they all have the sort of paint smears and splatters and stuff like that. It looks an awful lot like that, which is, I suppose, appropriate. But it definitely spruces up our background a little bit. I've been doing a lot of these very complicated backgrounds recently. Not that they're very hard, they're all very sort of, I suppose, impressionist? I don't know. They're a bit abstract is what I mean to say. They're not exactly like anything in particular. Yeah, impressionist definitely isn't the right word. But yeah, just something a bit more abstract. They're just, again, paint. It's the type of thing where if you remove the character, this is something not all that interesting on its own. It works much better when you've got the character there, and so it adds a little bit to it with just sort of kind of bits of paint and a little bit more interesting. But yeah, so now we got the detailed shading. Again, I'm not going to be doing anything too crazy with this. I've just got to sort of ready a dark kind of red color, which is going to be my my darker color, and then a bit of a yellowy one for my lighter color. So I'm also going to be doing a light line here, and I think I'm going to do a yellow light line, just so I think it'll kind of fit the palette a little bit more than a white one. I think a white one would maybe stand out a little too much. So I'll do a yellowy kind of light line. And yeah, then I already have my color palette all set up, which is just going to be a sort of red to yellow sort of gradient. Something a bit fiery is how it'll end up looking. It is, again, it's a sort of, it's the middle chunk of what would otherwise be a sunset color palette, but we're going to be using it to, again, create like a sort of a fiery look, so that it's not quite so so yeah, that it's a bit more like that rather than obviously the sunset, because the sunset wouldn't work here. That's not really what the sort of visual here is. So yeah. Anyways, I'll do the these little bits of detailed shading and the light line and all that stuff, and then I will finish up with the gradient maps, and then I'll be back to wrap up. So yeah. Alright, that is our light line and detailed shading and first gradient map done. So as you can see, I went for something kind of smooth was the gradient map I tried to go for. I tried to go for as smooth a gradient as I could manage. So we've got our lightest with a yellow, a slightly sort of an orangey yellow, then an orangey red, then a proper dark red, then a near black red. So I tried to go for a pretty smooth gradient from yellow to red, and I think I managed it. And again, it comes across quite well, I think, with this sort of, again, it keeps all the colors that are there. I mean, again, all the colors that are there are within that gradient, so they don't conflict in such a way where you'd end up losing anything or anything like that. So let me just keep going and keep making these gradients. So next one on the list is luminosity. Luminosity, probably going to want that to be kind of low. Actually, you know, let's see. Let me turn that back off so I can see what I'm doing here. I think I want it below because that's more, a bit richer in terms of color. Set this one to be 20. And then make another one. And put this above. And then have that be a color burn. Probably want this to be about 10% actually. Because I want to try and get a little bit more of the color out of this stuff. It's funny how much darker that makes it whenever it goes below. Yeah, well, I'll keep it above because I don't want it to be that much darker. So yeah, I chose to go with a soft light on my primary gradient map, and I kept it at 75%. That's a little higher than I'd normally put it. I'd normally put it at 70. Sorry, let me grab my texture here while I'm talking. But yeah, so again, I checked the overlay because again, I would. There's two different types of layers I tend to use for my primary gradient map. It's either soft light or overlay. I always check both just to see. The overlay is nice, but it's a bit aggressive. It's a bit much. You might have noticed it while I was tinkering with the gradient map there at the end of that previous section. But yeah, okay. I'm probably gonna want this texture to actually be kind of high. Because I want to create, yeah, these sorts of like fiery kind of bits of stuff here. Probably not that high, probably 25% might be good enough. Let me turn that on and off, because we don't want it to smear away too much of the like splatters and stuff like that. You know, yeah, turn that down to 20%. See if that's any better. And again, it never really hits the character that strong whenever it's low like this. Let's see how it is down here. Yeah, again, it just sort of, again, kind of blends into our sort of gradients and stuff like that, and our vignettes in the background. But yeah, I think that looks alright. I think that works. It's funny, because I felt like whenever I started this one, I was a little apprehensive. I felt like the base sketch was a little clunky. But I think ultimately it came out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, again, as I was saying before, I sort of tried a few different things with the gradient maps, but I think the soft light looked pretty nice. I think it's sort of, again, a bit subtler than what the overlay would have given us. The overlay would have given us something very kind of aggressive. And while that would have worked in a way, I just sort of feel like I don't want to lose too much of the sort of primary colors here. Because yeah, a lot of the other colors, a lot of the sort of, yeah, red is much more orange now, where it was a sort of a kind of a deep, well, I don't want to say deep, a sort of a bright primary red. A lot of the time Ken's Gi is sometimes a sort of more orangey red, sometimes it's more of a slightly more on the pink to purple scale. What I would call a sweeter red, something that moves a little closer to pink, and then sometimes it moves a little closer to orange. So I suppose here it moves closer to orange, and I suppose it depends on it just depends on the different versions. It depends on who's coloring it. But yeah, a lot of the time it tends to sit kind of right in the middle, just as I say, that sort of bright primary red, and that's what it was originally. But then obviously the gradient maps came in and changed that. But that's sort of the point of using them. But yeah, anyways, I think that's enough rambling. I think I will wrap this up because I'm pretty happy with that. Ultimately, I think the final product here works a lot better. I think a lot of the background stuff kind of adds to it. I think a lot of the sort of just little tiny adjustments that I made during the details, and also not being able to see the underlying shape of the body, I think also helps. Because obviously with how baggy the clothes are, it's better to not be able to actually see all of the underneath. And I think that was maybe throwing me off during the base sketch, is the fact that obviously, yeah, you can see the underlying body sketch. So you can see the shape of his body, and it throws things off because the baggier clothes just don't sit right in my mind whenever you see that. But anyways, I'll actually start wrapping up now. Because yeah, I'm happy with that. So yeah, if you liked the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking or not. I would of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that, so just do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking or not. And if you would like to subscribe, it's the same deal. Do it, please. Or don't, I don't mind. You've presumably seen the YouTube video before, so you know where the subscribe button is. It's below the video. I didn't need to tell you that, but I chose to. And yeah, if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment, politely worded, or just don't do it at all. If you're going to do it politely. I don't want to have to sift through a bunch of rude comments. That would be, it would be preferable if I could just see it clearly, plainly, and nicely. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I'll see you next time. So with all that said, I think that is us. So I will say goodbye, and I will leave you. So, bye-bye.